All right, hello English 101 students. This is a video to go over the career essay that's due second week in November. Go ahead and print out the essay if you haven't already and follow along with what I'm discussing here because you might want to take notes as I'm going along. So first and foremost, let's look at the due dates. Now make sure that you're looking at your essay sheet and your calendar to see if the due dates are the same, but the 9th of November, introduction, thesis, and outline is due. And then on the 12th, the final essay is due in Canvas. I know that's a Saturday, but since the 11th is a holiday for Veterans Day, I thought I would add an extra day for the assignment. All right, the assignment itself. Many people enter college with an idea of what they want to do with their lives, but are unsure about exactly what path to take for a career. In a 1,200 to 1,500 word investigative paper, discuss a career path that you might like to take. Now, 1,200 seems like a lot of words. Perhaps after the first couple essays that were a little bit shorter, but since you're incorporating research, especially if you decide to quote your source material, there's going to be a little bit of added word count. So I wouldn't stress about the word count. It should be something that all of you are capable of dealing with. For this assignment, you'll discuss the career in terms of what you want out of a job, and that's really important. You're going to discuss the career in terms of what you want out of a job. So what do you want to make? Where do you want to live? How much school do you want to go through? What kind of job environment do you want? Do you want to work around people? Do you want to work around by yourself? Do you want to own your own business? These are the types of things you're going to be focusing on in this paper, not just listing a bunch of statistics about your job. You'll do research as well, but that's not the focus. Okay, so continuing on, whatever criteria you choose for investigating a career, make sure that these are the most important to you. Kind of a common trap with this paper is students will try to look at too many aspects of the job. And what that turns into is a paper that has a bunch of short paragraphs that none of them really go into depth. What I want you to do is think about the 3 or 4 things that are most important to you. Discuss what you want out of that item, and then, incorporate your research into the discussion. Whatever you choose to write about, you'll be expected to incorporate the material you read about in this unit. Now, we only have a couple of chapters in terms of writing style, but we are looking heavily at the MLA documentation stuff. Now, if you are watching this online, that there was that little card that came with your book that has the MLA changes, because the MLA changed after our textbook came out. You have to use the new version of the MLA, which is outlined in that card that came with your textbook. Okay, so what are you being asked to do in this paper? In this unit, we'll be reading both the causal analysis and documenting sources chapter of the textbook. However, this paper is going to be more than just looking up stuff about a career and regurgitating it on the page. You must decide what you want out of a career and investigate it through this lens. The purpose of doing this is fairly straightforward. Statistically, most college students change their major once or twice, especially before they get a 4-year degree. And what I want to design this paper to do is to make you do the type of thinking that will help you regardless of what kind of career you choose. So, if you're thinking about what you want out of a job, you'll be able to narrow down some of the important things about that, so you can apply that information even if you decide to change your major or your focus down the road. Continuing on, the idea here is for you to do work that will benefit you regardless of the career you choose eventually. So even if you change your mind in the future, you can use the thinking you use on this paper to your benefit. At the end of the paper, you must make a strong case whether or not you will continue pursuing this career through your contemplation and research on the topic. So in the conclusion, if you're starting to have doubts, you can talk about that. But whatever your overall feeling about the job is, once you discovered it, or once you've done the research on it, is what you're going to talk about in the conclusion. So you're going to kind of wrap it up and then make a plan for the future in the conclusion for the paper. Your introduction and early part of the essay should clearly define your career choice you're going to discuss, culminating in a thesis statement that indicates the path you plan on pursuing. This is an important part of it. All of us know what a nurse, or have interacted with a nurse, or postal worker, or a waitress, or lots of other professions. But that doesn't mean that we know what they do in their day-to-day lives. Because of that, early on in the paper, you need to kind of give a clear definition of what that person, you're going to have to probably research it, what that career does behind the scenes, some of the stuff that the public doesn't know. So early on in your paper, that's again why we're doing the defining chapter. You need to define this career for your audience so people can follow along. Culminating thesis statement that indicates with the path you're planning on pursuing. One thing in the body of this paper that I want to emphasize is don't leave it up to the reader to interpret the information you provide. In this paper, I see a lot of paragraphs that have, this is what I want out of this aspect, say salary. This is how much I want to make because I want to have this kind of house and this kind of car and have this many kids, whatever it might be. And then they'll provide a bunch of information and then move on to the next paragraph. But there's one more step that everybody really needs to take, and the way I'll discuss that is digestion of the information. You start off with what you want out of that item. You talk about your research, but before transitioning to the next paragraph, you really need to give an inkling of what how your opinion has changed based on the research that you've done, or what you think about that information. Digest the information in each paragraph before moving on to the next one. Okay, research component of this paper. You'll be asked to use 4 outside sources for the paper. One of the sources must be the STARS transfer guide, and there is a PowerPoint on both the brick and mortar class and the online class showing you how to access STARS. If you go to the JD website, it's under the tools that you use to get into Canvas. You'll see STARS. You must copy and paste the first page of your STARS guide and submit it with your paper. It's the first page of the STARS guide after you fill it out, and it'll have your name and address and email on it. That page needs to be included with your paper. It can either be at the end of your essay or turned in as a separate file. Let's see. You must copy and paste, blah, blah, blah. Although we will go over it in class, I will post a PowerPoint, like I just mentioned, on how to access STARS if you don't know how. This will also contain help with accessing the library's career resources. Actually, if you go to the Useful Links tab on the library homepage, toward the bottom, there is a section on career resources. Now, some of them are job boards like Monster, Career Builder, but there you can find the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And this is done by the U.S. Department of Labor. And this is where all the sites like Monster and Career Builder and Salary.com get their information from. So you get it from the horse's mouth. That's the Occupational Outlook Handbook. You can get there by clicking on Useful Links on the library's homepage at jdcc.edu. Okay, the next bullet point, you may not use Wikipedia or any online encyclopedia besides the Britannica or Microsoft Encarta. You can find those through the library's website. Now, another thing I want to remind everybody of, and this is part of the syllabus, but you may not have read the syllabus for a while. This course has an approved research material policy. What does this mean? Well, you should go read it on the syllabus, but in essence, it means that if it's not a .gov or a .edu, or it doesn't come from one of the library's database like EBSCO, Academic Search Premier, etc., prior approval to use it on your essay. And that means emailing me the link to the source you want to use, and I will either approve it or not. If books don't need prior approval. And a lot of students will ask me, why do I have to get approval for a .org? And that's a reasonable question, because the American Heart Association is in a .org. But .org only means organization. And as most of you are well aware, some organizations have quite a bias. The NRA is a .org. PETA is a .org. I don't know if this is true or not, but if the Ku Klux Klan had a website, it'd be a .org. So even though a lot of .orgs are useful and valid, I still want to approve .org websites to make sure it doesn't have an extreme bias. Okay, continuing on. In this paper, you must use standard MLA formatting, that's the new edition, for in-text citations and your works cited page. We'll read chapters in your book that cover MLA documentation requirements. Please note your works cited page does not count toward your word count. And that's important. So the essay has to be 1,200 words, not the essay plus works cited 1,200 words. And I have posted quite a few research paper resources on both websites already. I'm going to double check and make sure that I have everything that I want. And I will be periodically adding more research resources to the websites. Okay, formatting stuff needs to be 1,200 words, have a good thesis, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure that your essay is formatted correctly so you don't get a late penalty. Now, on the rubric that you can find on page 2, you'll notice that the essay portion is worth 100 points, and then the research portion is worth 50 points. Now, I'll let you read this on your own, but I want to point out that the research portion is worth that much because I want you to make sure that you don't take for granted the work that we're going to be doing on research for this paper and properly citing using MLA documentation. Because you could have an A paper, but if you don't do the research stuff right, it's going to knock it down quite a bit. So make sure as we're reading the sections in the book on how to cite our sources correctly, and as I'm posting PowerPoints or other resources, that you take it seriously and make sure that you are getting as close as possible to the right way of doing things. You also want to avoid plagiarism too. Now, I do want to make a note on that before I finish up this video. This is a research component. You might be worried about accidentally plagiarizing. Well, if you're working hard to cite your sources and make mistakes, I'll work with you. Like any new skill, if you make some mistakes, that's understandable. However, if you don't put the effort in to try and cite your sources correctly and just kind of throw things together, that's the type of paper I'm probably going to be harsher on, because I want at trying to cite correctly. All right, off the soapbox with that. So if you have any questions about your career essay, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. Send me a text, an email, Canvas message, and we can get to work on this. Like I said, the intro and outline is due on Wednesday, November 9th. Final draft is due on Saturday, the 12th.